Good evening. It's good to see you tonight. Good to see Robert and Ginger back with us. Certainly our hearts and prayers go out to this good couple. Double whammy, we sometimes say. I mean, both have lost a parent in the last couple of weeks. I know Ginger will be getting us information on the funeral, which will be this Saturday, Lord willing, and we'll get more information in just short order. But certainly we want to extend our sympathy to them, and it's good to see them back in our class tonight. We're in 1 Samuel chapter 28. It's good to see some of you that were sick back with us. It's unfortunate that some who had been sick and gotten well are sick again and not able to be with us, and others that have gotten sick and not able to be with us. I mean, this is a very unusual round of flu season and other ailments that seem to be going back and forth, and it's very unfortunate and disheartening thing, but certainly we're glad that you're able to be with us tonight, and I look forward to our study. Before we delve into this, I'd like to make a few general observations. Something to consider. When you hear Jesus is depicted as sitting on someone's throne other than simply the throne of God, how is that throne generally described? The throne of David. Imagine, if you will, referring to the throne of Jesus as the throne of Saul. And I want you to ask yourself, why are we not referring to this as the throne of Saul? And of course, we're answering that question in our study in this Wednesday night series. But here's the thought I want to confront your mind with. When God chose Saul, and indeed, God chose Saul, did God intend to make him a king and his children after him to reign in his stead? Did God intend that? He said he did. In chapter 13 seemed to indicate again in chapter 15 that was his intention. However, Saul's behavior would keep God from continuing with that intent, not to follow through with his intention. But what if Saul had not taken this turn for the worse? What if Saul had remained faithful? What if Saul, who started out well, did Saul start out well? Was he humble? Was he courageous? Did God not give him another spirit? Was he not God's prince over his people? Captain over his people? Indeed he was. Isn't it tragic that jealousy so consumed this man that it not only ruined his opportunity to be king and to allow the Messiah to one day reign on his named throne, but it ultimately destroyed his relationship with God, period, outright. In fact, that's what we're going to be reminded about tonight. God had cut him off. There was no more opportunity for him to speak to God or God to speak to him. He and God are finished. And that's tragic. And why is this the case? It all boils down to the fact that a young man in his kingdom bailed him out by faith in God, because this young man had faith in God, bailed him and his army out of a jam. And literally that's what happened. David came to the scene, heard what Goliath was saying, and by faith in God was able to overcome the giant and vanquish the Philistines on that occasion, and thereby give Israel a great victory. And because of this, the women are singing David's praises more than they're singing Saul's praises, and that's all there is to it. Nothing more can be said from that day forward. Another thing about David is this young man was one who was commissioned actually to be in his palace to bring comfort to him, sing music, play music, and sing songs to him. And so when you think about David's value to Saul, it was really invaluable. He not only was there to comfort him and entertain him, he was there to rescue him when he genuinely needed to be rescued. And so Saul repaid him by allowing the green-eyed monster to destroy what God intended for him. God intended for him to be king and his sons after him. And so we should be saying today, Jesus is sitting on Saul's throne. But That's not to be because Saul allowed jealousy to ruin him. When you think about how jealousy affects us, it really only harms the one who's entertaining it. It's not really hurting the object of whatever it is you're jealous of. You're only hurting yourself. And truly that is the case with Saul. And we're reading about the beginning of his final demise, beginning here in chapter 28. But before we get there, notice these opening general thoughts about what's happening with David. Verse 1, it happened in those days that the Philistines gathered their army together for war to fight with Israel. And Achish said to David, "You assuredly know that you will go out with me to battle, you and your men." And David said to Achish, "Surely you know what your servant can do." And Achish said to David, "Therefore I will make you one of my chief guardians forever." Before we begin with verse 3, I want to ask you, how is it that David came to find himself in a situation like this? How did David wind up in this particular position in his life? He's fleeing from Saul, but as we noted last week, when he fled to the land of the Philistines, did he flee there? Did he go take refuge there because he had consulted with God and sought God's advice? Or did he just decide on his own, I'm going to go hide out among the Philistines? That was David's own choosing. He was there for an indefinite period of time. We don't know how long. Burton Kaufman suggests he was there probably as much as 22 years. If that's the case, that was a long period of time to be among the Philistines. We don't really know exactly how long he was there. We do know that Achish will say later in chapter 29, I believe it is, that David had been there for days and years, plural. So how long, we don't know. But he indeed had been among the Philistines. And so now David is confronted with this very untenable situation. I mean, what are the Philistines getting ready to do? Well, not just make David one of them, but the Philistines are planning battle against too. And who's Israel to David? His own people. And they're not just his own people, they are the people of God. These are God's chosen. And so David has now aligned himself with these Philistines and finds himself in this situation. Why is David in this situation? Is my question again. Why is he here? Because he chose to be among the Philistines. You remember what Paul said in 1 Corinthians 15:33? Be not deceived, evil communication do what? So we have to be careful who we associate with, don't we? We have to be careful who we talk to, who we give credence to, who we allow to influence us. It may be that if we're associating with the wrong people, eventually we might find ourselves actually fighting against the people of God, which puts you in a very untenable situation. Isn't it interesting, though, we're going to get to this chapter 29, how God rescues David from this. And it's also interesting to notice how David responded to Achish. Achish said to David, "You know you're going to go with me, right?" And I'm paraphrasing, but that's what he's saying to him. "You know you're going to go with me, right?" And what did David say? "Yes, I'm going to go with you. As the Lord lives, I'm going with you." Did he say no? What did he say? You can do what I can do. That's kind of vague, isn't it? He's not really committing, is he? You know what I can do. I mean, David's slick. I mean, he'd been lying to Achish for years. I mean, we learned that in chapter 27. He would go out and raid and come back and tell Achish he went, to raid among the Israelites. So that's why he thinks David's one of them now. And so now he's confronted with this, and he's like, So rather than just come right out and say, "Yeah, you can count on me," he's like, "You know what I can do." So you might say, another way of saying, "You know what I'm capable of." It might have been another way of saying, "Yes, I'm willing to go against the Israelites," which he hadn't been doing. He had been lying about doing that, but he had lied to Achish for so long that maybe he's just expecting Achish to believe that and say, "Well, you know what I can do. I can go against my own people. It won't bother me. I've learned to sleep at night in spite of doing all." I mean, maybe that's what he meant. I don't know. But he really is kind of being a little evasive here if you think about how he answers. But anyway, that's just kind of setting the stage, and we're going to drop David for a moment and pick up with Saul again in verse 3. Again, some more background material to kind of set the stage. The inspired narrator is setting the stage for us. And so Samuel had died, and we already read about that, and all Israel had lamented for him and buried him in Ramah in his own city. And Saul had put the mediums and the spiritists out of the land. Now, I don't remember reading about that, but obviously he had done that. And the assumption would be he had done that at some prior time in his reign as king. We might say during his good days, as a good king and an obedient king, he had done the right thing. And of course we say he did the right thing because mediums and spiritists were not to be condoned among Israel. In fact, someone read for me, Steve, how about reading Exodus 22 and verse 18 for me, please, sir? And while you're turning there, I'll be turning to Deuteronomy chapter 18. And of course, all this was familiar to Saul. Deuteronomy 18, verse 9 beginning. You have that passage, Steve?
Yes. You shall not permit a sorceress to live.
Okay. Well, that's pretty straightforward, isn't it? If there's a sorceress among you, kill her. She's not allowed to live. In Deuteronomy 18, verse 9, when you come into the land which the Lord your God is giving you, you shall not learn to follow the abominations of those nations. There shall not be found among you anyone who makes his son or his daughter pass through the fire, or one who practices witchcraft, or a soothsayer, or one who interprets omens, or a sorcerer, or one who conjures spells, or a medium, or a spiritist, or one who calls up the dead. For all who do these things are an abomination to the Lord, and because of these abominations, the Lord your God drives them out from before you. Now, I read that before we read what we're about to read. So in God's view, declared view of those who conjure up the dead, how does God describe them? An abomination. And we know that what is the sentence for those who commit such things? So Saul, when driving out the mediums and spiritists in the land at a previous time, not recorded for us, but obviously had done that. But when he had driven them out, how did he drive them out? Were they stoned? Were they burned at the stake? Were they beheaded? We don't know. Did he simply tell them to get lost or I'll take you out? Well, according to the law of Moses, they were to be summarily executed. And so we would assume that they were executed. Which, if you keep that in mind, when you read what you're about to read, it may also play, if you read between the lines, you may ask who's playing who and who's deceiving who in this situation. Who's pretending not to know who he is. I mean, just kind of keep all these things in mind as we read this. So Samuel died, all Israel had lamented for him and buried him in Ramah in his own city, and Saul had put the mediums and the spiritists out of the land. So there's our setting of the stage for what we're about to read. So the Philistines gathered together and came and encamped at Shunem. So Saul gathered all Israel together, and they encamped at Gilboa. When Saul saw the army of the Philistines, he was afraid, and his heart trembled greatly. And when Saul inquired of the Lord did not answer him either by dreams or by Urim or by prophets. Saul said to his servants, find me a woman who is a medium, that I may go to her and inquire of her. And his servant said to him, in fact, there is a woman who is a medium at Endor. So Saul disguised himself and put on other clothes, and he went, and 2 men with him, and they came to the woman by night. And he said, please conduct a seance for me, and bring up for me the one I shall name to you. The woman said to him, look, you know what Saul has done, how he has cut off the mediums and the spiritists from the land. Why then do you lay a snare for my life to cause me to die? Now, who was the tallest man in Israel? Saul. So if you put on different clothes, are you going to be able to, maybe he walked on his knees, or? Is she that stupid? I mean, if you think someone who's in this business, one of the ways they're able to put off convincing people is that they're pretty perceptive and they're observant. And so if she doesn't recognize already who this is, I mean, maybe she doesn't. Maybe he's just really good at disguising himself. I don't know. But he was the tallest man in all Israel. And so she said, why do you want to lay a snare for my life? So apparently he had put them to death. Saul swore to her by the Lord, saying, as the Lord lives, no punishment shall come upon you for this thing. The woman said, whom shall I bring up for you? And he said, bring up Samuel for me. When the woman saw Samuel, she cried out with a loud voice. And the woman spoke to Saul, saying, why have you deceived me? For you are Saul. I'm just curious. If she had in fact been deceived and did in fact not know who he was initially. What is it about Samuel's presence that makes her know this is Saul? Did Saul say something? Or rather, did Samuel say something? Samuel's here.
Did she bring him up?
I have no idea how to answer that question. I know that God sees what she's doing as an abomination. So is God doing this through her? You know, it's a difficult question to answer. It's really not as cut and dry and easy to deal with as you might imagine. But she saw Samuel, and she cried out with a loud voice, probably because she was scared. And why have you deceived me? For you are Saul. And the king said to her, do not be afraid. What do you see? Now, wait a minute. Wait a minute. Was she in another room? And was she talking through a curtain or a door? If Samuel was indeed there, you know, here's a theory and just a thought. She doesn't like Saul very much. Why would she not like Saul very much?
Because he killed all her family.
Killed all of her friends. Of course, she could have cornered the market on it, but, you know, she's not looking at it that way. She's like, hey, and maybe he's coming to set a snare for my life. She doesn't like this man very much. She's a perceptive woman because this is her line of work. She had to be perceptive and observant. It's possible, I'm just throwing out a theory, that this whole thing is a scam. And she's just telling him this because she knows the likelihood of his dying in battle with the Philistines is great anyway. And besides, some of the facts that are revealed are not completely, totally accurate. So she might just be making this up on the fly and telling him this because he said, who do you see? Did he not see Samuel? And so, have you ever seen a seance depicted on TV? Don't say you've ever been to one. But have you ever seen one depicted on TV? And what do they normally do? Sit around a round table or something? And, ooh, and all that kind of weird stuff. And so somebody starts hearing voices or, you know, whatever. And does everybody see this ghost or this appearance? No. So, yeah. Maybe that's where we get the idea. So Saul doesn't see Samuel. What do you see? And the woman said to Saul, I saw a spirit ascending out of the earth. So it said to her, what is his form? And she said, an old man is coming. Here's another question I want to ask. And this, you can't answer this question, but I'm just throwing it out there because this is how my mind reacts to this. Okay, when we die, and I go to wherever I'm going to go, am I still going to be bald-headed? Why is that funny, Lynn? I'm just saying, will I be bald-headed? I'll have a new body, okay. So what I'm saying is when she describes who she's seeing, it sounds more like a memory, doesn't it? Something she's conjuring up in her own mind. This is what he looks like, and she's telling him, I mean, when a dead person comes back from the dead, do they look exactly like they did when they were alive? And still dressed? They're still wearing those clothes? I thought Job said, naked I came into the world, naked I'm leaving the world. So maybe Saul's naked, but I mean, he's not naked. He's wearing his old clothes. I'm like, I'm just saying there's more than one way of looking at this. Then again, maybe God is allowing the hardness of their hearts to allow all this to take place. I don't know. She said, an old man is coming up, and he's covered with a mantle, and Saul perceived that it was Samuel, and he stood with his face to the ground and bowed down. Now Samuel said to Saul, now here's really gets interesting. If he can't see him, is he actually seeing him now? Or is he hearing him now? Or is he hearing some ventriloquist who's pretending to be him? Or what's actually happening here?
He's bringing him up.
Okay, well, let's assume that's what happened. So now he didn't see him at first. Maybe now he sees it. I'm not trying to mess with you. I'm being honest with you. This is a very difficult passage, and it's almost impossible to know. You can read it 6 one way and half a dozen the other. It's like it could mean this or it could mean that, and I really don't have any answers for you. There's just not enough information to say. It is interesting that Samuel said to Saul, if this is a real thing, why have you disturbed me by bringing me up? What would that suggest about being dead? What's that?
He wasn't in the grave anymore.
No, I'm saying, why have you disturbed me? What would that suggest to you about dead people? He's resting. Who wants to come back here? I mean, when you think about it, this is true. I can say this with certainty. And this is something we have to remind ourselves of, as Christians especially. Why do we want to cling to this life? I mean, we hear Peter saying, and Isaiah reminding us, he that would love life, the songwriter, he that would love life and see good days. I understand that. No one wants to despise life. We don't want to end our life prematurely. We don't want to do that. But why is it we cling to life so tenaciously? Why is it we're so afraid? And I suppose the answer is because this is all we know. This is all we're accustomed to. We've never been to the other side. But by faith, should we not understand that when we get over the Jordan, as we say, and we're in paradise, why on earth, pardon the pun, would we want to come back here? And really, if this is true, and what Samuel's saying is, and I believe it probably is true, well then, he's saying what you and I would say. Why did you bring me back here? Why did you disturb me? My work is done. My ministry's over. I'm now retired. Leave me alone. Don't bother me. Okay, you had a comment, Tessa?
I was just going to say, going back to whether or not Samuel was actually there.
Uh-huh.
The way I read it in verse 12, it sounds like the inspired narrator here is actually saying that Samuel's there. It says, when the woman saw Samuel, she cried out with a loud voice. So I read it that he was really there. He was actually.
So, maybe you're right. Maybe when she saw him first and then Saul saw him later, that's.
Right. That's not her saying, oh, I see Samuel. That's the narrator telling us she sees Samuel.
But when the woman saw Samuel, you're right. That's what it says, right?
Well, when the women saw Samuel, that's one thing. But when Samuel comes along and talks to Saul himself, that's quite another thing.
Yeah. So maybe she saw him first,
Well, yeah.
and then he saw him. But why did he have to ask for a description? He could have just waited a few seconds, a billionth of a second, and he could have seen him himself. I don't know. It's just, there's a lot about this narrative that's just, it's hard to put all the pieces together, isn't it? But that's a very good point. Good observation. So Saul answered, I am deeply distressed, for the Philistines make war against me, and God has departed from me and does not answer me anymore, neither by prophets nor by dreams. Therefore I've called you, that you may reveal to me what I should do. And Samuel said, so why do you ask me? Seeing the Lord has departed from you and has become your enemy, and the Lord has done for himself as he spoke by me, for the Lord has torn the kingdom out of your hand and given it to your neighbor David, because you did not obey the voice of the Lord, nor execute his fierce wrath upon Amalek. Therefore the Lord has done this thing to you this day. Moreover, the Lord will also deliver Israel with you into the hand of the Philistines. And tomorrow you and your son will be with me. The Lord will also deliver the army of Israel into the hand of the Philistines. Immediately Saul fell full length on the ground and was dreadfully afraid because of the words of Samuel. There was no strength in him, for he had eaten no food all day and all night. He's been too upset to eat, and he's been traveling. So now he's so distressed he just can't bring himself to eat. This was not good news. Whether it be conjured up in the mind of this spiritist or whether it actually be the words of Samuel, and very likely it was the words of Samuel. My difficulty in it being the words of Samuel is what's taking place here is an abomination to God. Why would God allow this to happen? Why would God allow Samuel to come and speak? Maybe you could argue that this was an expression of God's mercy, his mercy in allowing Samuel to give one last message to Saul. That last message being, you're going to die tomorrow. You're going to lose. Your army's going to be defeated. Is that, I mean, I don't know. That's just, those are the kinds of thoughts that I entertain and really have no definitive answer for. So the woman came to Saul and saw that he was severely troubled and said to him, look, your maidservant has obeyed your voice, and I've put my life in my hands and heeded the word which you spoke to me. Now therefore please heed also the voice of your maidservant. Let me set a piece of bread before you and eat, that you may have strength when you go on your way. He refused and said, I will not eat. So his servants together with the woman urged him, and he heeded their voice. He arose from the ground and sat on the bed. Now the woman had a fatted calf in the house, and she hastened to kill it. And she took flour and kneaded it and baked unleavened bread from it. So she brought it before Saul and his servants, and they ate. Then they arose and went away that very night. Any questions or comments about the witch of Endor? I was a little fearful about discussing the witch of Endor on Valentine's Day, but chapter 29, verse 1. Now the Philistines gathered together all their armies at Aphek, and the Israelites encamped by a fountain which is in Jezreel. And the lords of the Philistines, how many lords do we know of from our earlier reading in 1 Samuel? There were at least 5 of them, weren't there? 5 major cities, 5 kings or overlords, however you want to describe them. And so Achish is one of them. And David has been under the shelter and the protection of Achish for some time. But now that they're going into battle against the Israelites, the lords, plural, of the Philistines passed in review by hundreds and by thousands, but David and his men passed in review at the rear with Achish. Then the princes of the Philistines said, what are these Hebrews doing here? That's a good question. And if I were a Philistine, I want to know, what are these Hebrews doing here? Remember the Star Trek episodes from back in the 60s? You had the Klingons and you had the humans, you know. And can you imagine a Klingon, you know, on the Enterprise? And you know, what's this Klingon doing here? He's not going to work with us when we invade these people. I've always thought of a Philistine like Klingons. You ever thought about that? I don't know why, but that's how I've always thought of Philistines in my head, as Klingons. Anyway, I can understand the Klingons saying, why do we want this human going with us? I mean, it don't make any sense. So, and here's David. And all the while, I want you to keep this in mind. God has delivered David once before from doing something rash and sinful by a very beautiful and wise woman, Abigail, who interceded and reasoned with David and prevented him from doing something terrible. And he gave God the credit, and rightly so. God prevented David from doing a terrible thing. But now here David is prepared to go with Achish, because you know what I can do, he said. Now the question is, and listen to what the lords of the Philistines are about to say, because I think they're probably right. They're probably right. Achish said to the princes of the Philistines, is this not David, the servant of Saul, king of Israel, who has been with me these days or these years? And to this day I have found no fault in him, since he defected to me. So that's how Achish saw David as a genuine defector. Was David a genuine defector? Indeed he was not. He was a liar, but he was not a defector. He'd been lying to Achish all this time. But he's not been a defector in the sense that Achish thought. The princes of the Philistines were angry with him, so the princes of the Philistines said to him, make this fellow return, that he may go back to the place which you have appointed for him. Do not let him go down with us to the battle, lest in the battle he become our adversary. For what could he reconcile himself to his master, if not with the heads of these men? That's what they're thinking. They're thinking if he wants to really make amends with Saul, the best thing for him to do is turn on us, rip off our heads and give them to Saul. And they knew David was capable of doing that. Is this not David, of whom they sang to one another in dances, saying, Saul has slain his thousand, and David? This had gone far and wide. Even the Philistines knew about that song that had so enraged Saul. So Achish called David and said to him, surely as the Lord lives, you have been upright, and you're going out and you're coming in with me, and the army is good in my sight. Hold on. Was Achish right? Had David been upright with him? For to this day I have not found evil in you since the day of your coming to me. Well, it's because you hadn't really investigated. Nevertheless, the Lord do not favor you. Therefore, return now and go in peace, that you may not displease the lords of the Philistines. So David said to Achish, but what have I done? Now, if David's going to follow through with this ruse, this makes sense. What he's saying makes sense. What have I done? And to this day, what have you found in your servant as long as I've been with you, that I may not go and fight against the enemies of my lord the king? He's really milking this thing. I mean, you ought to let me go. No reason not to let me go. David's been lying to him about all the stuff he'd been doing. Then Achish answered and said to David, I know that you are as good in my sight as an angel of God. You ever think that maybe, and I'm just asking this question, that David's conscience was bothering him at some point in this exchange? David had to say, I'm really a crudball. I mean, I've been telling this guy, or maybe David just didn't have a dab of respect for him because he's a Philistine. Maybe he's thinking, I don't have to respect you. You're less than human. I don't know how David's looking at him, but I do know this. David has been less than honest with him. But Achish thought David had been completely, totally upright. And he's singing his praises. Nevertheless, the prince of the Philistines have said, he shall not go with us to the battle. Now therefore rise early in the morning with your master's servants whom come with you, and as soon as you are up early in the morning, have light, then depart. So David and his men rose early to depart in the morning to return to the land of the Philistines, and the Philistine went up to Jezreel. Now, this was a good thing because God was able to deliver David. Have you ever been tempted to do something wrong? And you prayed and asked God to help you not to give in to that temptation? You don't have to answer them, I'm just asking you. You ever ask God to help you with a temptation? Did you realize and remember that there's no temptation that has confronted you that's not common to man? But with every temptation, God will provide what? Was David tempted, perhaps, to go fight his own people? I mean, how many Israelites would have had to die at David's hand in order to continue with this ruse? Or would David have immediately turned when the battle began and began taking off heads of the Philistines? I mean, I don't know. It's interesting to me how this would have turned out. Aren't you thankful for David's sake that he didn't have to make that choice? That God indeed delivered him? And isn't it interesting to note how God works in our lives? How God preserves his people, saves his people, even from their own stupidity sometimes, and their own rash decisions. And I think it's fair to say that what David had done by going and seeking refuge among the Philistines maybe was an act of desperation, and we have to pity him in the sense that it was an act of where else is he going to go? We might argue that. But to seek refuge among your own enemies. I mean, these are the arch enemies of Israel, and you're going to seek refuge there? But that's what David did because he did not consult God, did not seek God's counsel. He just went out and did this. Now he finds himself in this very difficult situation. But I'm going to point out to you, and I believe the text is just done, that God not only had mercy on David in letting him get out of this dilemma, he delivered him from this dilemma. But we're about to read in chapter 30, it was more than that. Had David not returned home, note what else would have happened to David. Chapter 30, it happened when David and his men came to Ziklag on the third day that the Amalekites had invaded the south at Ziklag, attacked Ziklag and burned it with fire, had taken captive the women and those who were there from small to great. They did not kill anyone, but carried them away. And now, we've got to stop here because I just mentioned several times now David had been lying to Achish. He had been telling Achish, I've been going into the territory of Israel and raiding, killing and plundering and raiding. He had not been going into Israel. He had instead been going where? Well, among others, the Amalekites. And when David raided a territory or a city or a village of the Amalekites, how many of their people did he spare? None of them were kept. All of them were killed, lest they stay alive and go back and report to Achish. Now the Amalekites see that David has abandoned his post, as it were, has left his family and all of his goods defenseless. And so they've come to take vengeance. But notice what the inspired writer said. They didn't kill anyone. Do you think that was by accident? Or was God not sparing David's family? Why were they spared? Who knows? There were no men among them. That might have been the reason. They didn't put up a fight. It was just women and children. So David and his men came to the city, and there it was burned with fire, and their wives, their sons, and their daughters had been taken captive. Then David and the people who were with him lifted up their voices and wept until they had no more power to weep. And David's 2 wives, Ahinoam the Jezreelitish and Abigail the widow of Nabal the Carmelite, had been taken captive. Now David was greatly distressed, for the people spoke of stoning him, because the soul of all the people was grieved, every man for his sons and his daughters. But David strengthened himself in the Lord his God. Okay, that's interesting. So they've been following David all this time. They've been loyal servants of David. They're his army, his own personal army. And now when the first sign of trouble arises, what do they threaten to do? I'm going to stone David. Isn't that amazing? How quickly people can turn on their leaders. And so how did David respond? What did David do?
Went to the Lord.
How did he do that? I won't name him because y'all know him very well and love him as I do. I had a long conversation with a brother today at work. And he asked me almost verbatim. He didn't realize we were studying this tonight. But he asked me almost verbatim, how do you rekindle that fire, brother? I said, no, slap me and see what happens. And I said, how do you rekindle that fire? I said, well, what did you do to get that fire to start with? And he began going over his life and the things that had happened earlier in his life. And he used to have really long hair. And he cut his hair and became sane and began to have a family. He grew up, came to know the Lord and obeyed the gospel, and began studying his Bible. And he just became a great leader in the church, and still is. But he was just openly saying to me today, how do you rekindle the fire that was once there? And it's almost another way of saying this same thing, but David strengthened himself in the Lord as God. How did David do that? Ma'am? How do you do that? How did David do that?
Humble yourself and go to the Lord. Talk to the Lord about it. But the humility is what David had that Saul didn't.
Okay. Instead of just doubling down and getting belligerent, he humbled himself.
Absolutely.
Okay. To answer the brother's question that was raised to me today, how would you have answered him? How do you rekindle that fire if you feel like you've lost it somewhere along the way? How do you rekindle that? How do you return to your first love and full of zeal again? And how do you do that? Is that it?
Repent, you need to repent of what's taking you away from him to begin with.
Well, isn't the question itself an indication of penitence already? I want to do better. I want to have that fire rekindled. He was asking me, how do I do that? I want it. How do I do it? So how do you go from step 1 to step 2? Get to work. Okay. What did God say to Elijah when he was in the cave hiding because all of my work, and that's basically what he's saying, is a waste. No one's listening to me. I haven't done any good. And God spoke to him and said, there's 7,000 haven't bowed the knee to Baal. You need to get back to work. And that's exactly right, Deanna. That's what God told Elijah to do. Go back to work. Just do what you did to start with. What did you do to start with when you first became a Christian? And for me, it involved hours of just reading the Bible with a friend. I had someone that was a Bible reader with me, and we would read out loud to each other. And we would just read and talk and discuss the Bible. And we prayed together. And then we would take what we're reading and studying and try to share it with others. And I think when I look back on it, how did I get started on this path? And that's how it started for me. And if I felt like I'm losing that, what should I do to regain that? Just find someone that wants to read with me. And you need to get chocolate cake too, because we had chocolate cake and coffee. And from Big Star, it was one of the best moist chocolate cake I've ever had. But we'd eat chocolate cake, and read the Bible, and talk about what we were reading. And then we would try to take what we were studying and share it with others. Clumsily, of course, but that's what we did. And that's what started me. I'm just speaking my own personal experience here. I don't know what it was for you, but that's how I answered him. Just go back to the first fruits, to your first works. What did you do to start with? What got you going in this direction? So David said to Abiathar the priest, Ahimelech's son, please bring the ephod here to me. And Abiathar brought the ephod to David. So David inquired of the Lord, saying, shall I pursue this troop? Shall I overtake them? And he answered him, pursue, for you shall overtake them, and without fail recover all. This is, I don't know about you, but I find this amazing. That David had made the choice he had to be among the Philistines. It put him in a terrible dilemma. Now that the Philistines are going to battle with the Israelites. And how David's going to be able to tell, I can't go with you. What's he going to tell Achish? She's been telling him all this time, I've defected to you and I've been killing all these Israelites, which was a lie. But now what's he supposed to do to get out of that jam? He didn't have to do anything. Providentially, God intervened. And the other Philistine, the Lord said, we can't trust this man. So send him back to where you've given him a place to live. And so by going back, he discovered on returning that his wife had been kidnapped, his children had been kidnapped, his goods and possession had been taken. And so David goes and pursues them. And not only does he pursue them and regain what he had, but David's about to enrich himself mightily. In fact, he's going to become so rich, he's going to be able to share some of that bounty with others throughout Judah, which will certainly endear him to those people. If you think about this is a compound blessing, what I'm trying to say. Not only did God rescue him, he's enriching him and blessing him mightily. My cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life. And was that because David was a perfect shepherd and never did anything wrong? No. Clearly not the case. But it is a testimony to God's goodness and the fact that God can see into a person's heart. We don't always have that ability. And we look at their actions and we conclude they're crud balls or no good or take them out, stone them, or whatever. But only God can look into a person's heart and determine whether or not that person is doing the right thing. So David went, and the 600 who were with him. I don't think we have time to read all this. We don't. We got about a minute. Any questions or comments about David and his dealing with Achish? I'm still amazed, after all you know about David, how he's able to assemble this army, how quickly they were willing to turn against him. They were going to stone him. They blamed him. But did they not all go themselves voluntarily with David to fight with the Philistines? Or maybe they were already telling David, see, look what you've done. You came here to the Philistines and you got us in this jam, and now our children, our wives have been kidnapped. I don't know, maybe that's what they were saying. This whole thing, David, is your fault. And so they're going to stone him over it. Yes, sir. What's that?
One interesting point that I got out of that particular verse right there to me was when David was sort of like closed in his life, in his presence. The Philistines don't trust him, even though he came to them
Yes.
for comfort or an escape. And now his own people that were supporting him, that he felt like they always had his back. A lot of times in life, even today, we have to get to a point where it looks like we can't go backwards and we can't go forward.
David had lost
So we just humble ourselves.
The Philistines have turned against him. His own people have turned against him. And so who else are you going to go to besides the Lord? That's a very good point. And so when you're sinking in despair, you cry out, Lord, save me. That's what Peter said, wasn't it? He's sinking beneath the waves. Lord, save me.
Instead of just staying in fellowship with God.
That's a very good point. He was. Where else are you going to go? He had no other options. And aren't you thankful that the Lord is there to rescue us, to lift us up when we need it? And indeed, that was the case with David.